Hello and welcome back to a beginner's guide to Toon Boom Harmony. Today we are not going to do any kind of drawing or animating. We are just going to look at the many ways Toon Boom can export the animations you've created. So let's say I've got an animation done. In this case it was some little animation I made for a tiny video game. And I want to export it. First of all, you can see that the animation actually has three distinct parts. The first frame, it's just an idle pose. Here in red is the run cycle, and in purple it's the death animation. If you want to do these markers here, you just have to select a part of those little marks above your timeline, right click, scene markers, create scene marker, select a color, maybe a name, not necessary, and you've got your scene markers. It's pretty handy. So here I've got my idle, my run cycle, and my death animation. Let's say I just want to export the idle as one single frame, and I want to export it as one single PNG file. Why PNG? It's so that the background behind the character would be transparent. To do that, you go to File, Export, OpenGL Frames. Here you have a few options to export your file. And what we're going to look at is first of all, location where you want to save it. So I'm going to choose right here. Give it a name. What format you want to export it at, and in order to have transparency, you have to use the format PNG4. If you use PNG normal, it would export, but it would have a fill color for the background. So that's for the image format. Options, not necessary to change anything. Resolution is if you want to export it at a resolution smaller than the original file. I think this one might be by 512 by 512. And here I'm just going to select current frame. This way it will only export the first frame here. I press OK. I go where it should be exported. It shows something a bit weird here, but when I open it, it's my image, just the way it's supposed to be. You can't see transparency here, but it has transparency. So that's how you would export one single frame. But if you want to export an animation, for example, I want to export all this here, we're going to have three major options. But first of all, let's put the start and beginning of our timeline around this red part so that it will only play this. So go at the beginning of this animation, press start. At the end here, press stop. And you see these two black corners that appear here. And what this means is when I play the animation, it will only play what's within these corners. And you can drag them a little further if you want, or even though here it's not necessary. So by doing that, I know that this animation starts at frame 2 and ends at frame 15. And we'll see why it's important to note that in a moment. So We're going to go into File, Export, OpenGL Frames again. Same settings, but we're going to export with a range from 2 to 15 because it's the range where we have our animation. So same thing, we do exactly the same thing, and when we look into where we have exported the animation, we can see that it was exported with every image of this run cycle. So there's that. But let's say you want to export it at a format where you can directly see your animation, and there are two formats that allow that when exporting in Toon Boom. First one is SWF, which is the Flash format, SWF. I think it's commonly called SWF. So let's click this. We've got a bunch of options as well. Where we're going to export it. Frames, again, range from 2 to 15. Source doesn't need to change. And it's all good. We export it. And now it's exported in the form of a SWF format that we can open with Adobe Flash. The SWF format is a bit specific because it won't work if you try to export an animation made with bitmap drawings. By definition, SWF, because it's the format of Flash, it will only export animation with vectors. It's not a commonly used format nowadays, but the biggest advantage of using it is if you're going to use this animation later in another software like After Effects or Game Maker or something else, because it's an animation saved in vectors, it's extremely light, and you can see in my file here, it's 64 kilooctets, which is extremely light for a sequence of images. So it's a good format because it's really easy to handle for a lot of softwares that can handle them. The only problem is it's currently one of the only formats in vectors that can have animation in it, and it's a format that is slowly dying. Unfortunately, a lot of softwares don't support it anymore. Like, for example, Adobe Premiere stopped supporting it, and I don't know for how long After Effects is going to support it, but unfortunately, it's not a format that we're going to see a lot in the long run. The other format you could export it in would be video format, and to do that, you do the same. You go to File, Export, Movie, and you have some options again. So let's choose something else. Again, display source, not important. Export range, again, from 2 to 15. Let's say same as scene resolution. And in movie option, we can choose the video format and sound format. The video format that I would recommend is H.264 because it's a good combination of at the same time light and pretty precise. The rest of the presets are not the most important. You can just try to play with them, try to see what kind of quality loss you could have by lowering quality and if it is worth it regarding the weight that you would save. This is something that you need to experiment with, but I really recommend the H.264 format for animation. And now you just click OK. It renders, and you can find it here. And we'll see that when you export without a background, when it's in Swift format, it will always be a white background instead. When you export in any other format that doesn't take in consideration transparency, it will be a black background, like it is here. And we can see it play as well. So that's it for the export from the drop-down menu here, but there's another main way to export, and this requires to go into the node view. So let's open the node view. Just going to make it a bit bigger, and there we are. So first of all, a little bit of introduction. Right now we only have displayed here 4 types of nodes. These nodes are drawing nodes. They are the drawing layers that we have created here. This is a composite. The role of a composite is it takes into its input here several images, several drawings, or several effects, and make them into one single output. And that's the way most of the nodes work. Most of them have an input on top and an output on the bottom. The green input has a meaning. It's for pegs and for transformation purposes. I'll explain this later when we get to cutout animation. But blue means it's an input or an output of an image, and green means it's an input or an output of a peg, which is something else. So we see we've got 3 images going into the composite. In that case, these are red because they are hidden. You can show them and hide them using shortcut A for activate and D for deactivate in the node view. So we only have this drawing visible. And then under this we have 2 important nodes. The display, it's what we are going to see in our scene. If I were to only display, let's say I'm going to activate this drawing, if I connect this drawing to the display instead of the composite, let's see, I remove the connection between composite and display, nothing appears. I make a connection between drawing and display, only this appears. So the way it works, by default, Toon Boom creates your workspace with a composite, a write, and a display. And everything you will create in the timeline is going to be linked to the composite so that it can be displayed through this link here that goes to the display. I hope it's clear enough. And here is the write node, and this is the important one when we're going to do any export. To go into the preferences or parameters of a node, you click on the yellow square here. So we do just that, and we see the layer properties. And in the layer properties of the write nodes, we have the output tab, which we are going to use. and we can choose to export either in drawing form or in movie form. If we export in drawing, we can choose the number of zeros for the export because it's going to export a sequence of images that are numbered one after the other. And we can also choose the format of the export. Again, most of the time you're going to want to use PNG4 because it's a pixel perfect format that takes, in fact, transparency, and this is the most used in animation when you want to deal with image sequences. If you want to export directly in video, you untick drawing, it will automatically select movie, and you can select movie options, and you have the same options that you had when you use the drop-down file here. So you might be thinking, why use this, which seems more convoluted than the drop-down menu, to do our export? The reason is it's mainly used in production and in studios because what it allows to do is you can have one writing node for all your files, and you have the possibility to have some specific settings, like if you want to export in a specific format of image sequences, if you have some very precise presets, instead of always going into the OpenGL frames and in the options to select the presets, if you just copy the node from one file to the other and duplicate it, it allows you to have always the same export. And that's something that's interesting with the nodes, is it's really useful for working with batches of files, and that's why it's very useful in studios. So let's say we want to export this in movies, in a video format. So I'll use the same preferences I used before with the H.264 format of video. I close, and nothing happened, and that's because to render the node, the right node, you have to go into File, Export, Render Right Nodes, or as you can see, there is a shortcut which is Ctrl-Shift-Y. And we can again select a few frames. Field composite option is not something that will come up when you work on your own projects. Not important. You can, however, tick preview if you want to. And here we have our export made with the writing node. And so that's about it with how to export in Toon Boom. You can see that there are a lot of formats, there are a lot of ways, and depending on whether or not you are going to use your animation later in another software, or if you want to directly upload it or have it as a video, there are many formats that can do both. And that's it for the exports in Toon Boom Harmony. Now you know how to get the animations you made into a format that you can either share or transfer to another software. And now that you've also had a quick introduction to the node view, we can finally get to tackle it as well. So, join me next time as we look into masks, blending, and other nice stuff that you can start to do with a network node in Toon Boom. Until then, take care.